Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jevly, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are so happy that you are part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find your podcast. We have two wonderful authors for you today. Our first guest is Pam Fries. She is the author of Something's Eating the Garden. And then we'll be speaking to Dawn Herbert about her faith-based book, Warrior Princess. This is a jam-packed show, so we want to get right to our guests. But before we do also want to remind you that on October 6th, we would love to meet you at the Orange County Children's Book Festival, the largest children's book festival in North America. It is happening on October 6th in Costa Mesa, California. Please, if you are in attendance, be sure to come on over to the Reading with Your Kids booth. I will be there with copies of my books, Real Magic, The Great Maritini, and Love That I Matter to You. We'll also have some guest authors. Lisa Caprelli will be there, Dennis Matthew, Marla Humer, Helena Bailey, and possibly others. We'll also be presenting the Reading with Your Kids Magic Show happening on the Illustrator stage at 12:40 and 2:35. Come on over. It's going to be a great time. I'd love to shake hands and meet all of you. That's the Orange County Children's Book Festival, October 6th at Costa Mesa, California. Admission is free. Joining us right now from the beautiful state of Washington, she is the author of a beautiful debut picture book, Something's Eating the Garden. Please welcome to the show, Pam Fries. Pam, how are you?
I am well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to have you on the show, and I'm really excited for you to tell us all about Something's Eating the Garden.
Well, the story began 7 years ago in 2012. My granddaughter was 4 years old, and she was spending the night with Mimi, who's myself, and Papa, and she just loved her Papa. And he was a big gardener, and we would go down and, look at the garden and get all the goods out of it. And his gardens were the kind you'd see in the magazines. Mm-hmm. And so one day while she was spending the night, we went down to his garden, and he bent down and he noticed one of the leaves had little holes in it, and he said, "Something's eating the garden." And so Lacey and I got silly, and we started saying things like, well, came and ate it, or the dog next door came over. And so we just had a lot of fun that day, and so she was spending the night, so she came back home, and I put her to bed that evening, and I sat on the couch and just started to write about the day, because it was such a fun day, and that was a highlight of it. And in about an hour and a half, the manuscript to the book was written. And then I thought, the kids would really like this, so I'll paint some pictures to go with it. And then I just kind of let it go after a little while, and it just kept nagging on at me. And so the beginning of last year, I just felt like God put it on my heart to get the book published by the end of the year. And, excuse me. And so I went ahead and asked my husband about it to see what he thought, and because he loved the book too. And he said, sure, go ahead and look at it, find out what we can do to get it published. Well, I started looking into it, and it was a world that I totally was lost in. It was just overwhelming. I looked in traditional publishers and found out I needed to write a query letter, and so I'd submit those, and then found out that it could be 6 months before I got a return on that if I did at all. Mm-hmm. And then if they accepted it, it could be another 4 years before it's published. Mm-hmm. But I really felt like I was supposed to have it published by the end of the year. So then I looked into hybrid publishing. I did get an editor to look over the grammatical stuff and things like that during that process. But so then I looked into hybrid publishing, mm-hmm. and I was, again, totally overwhelmed, and I found that it was very expensive for me, anywhere from, I found $6,000 to $15,000, and that's just something that I couldn't do. And then I kept getting emails from all these different places, and then I couldn't tell who was scamming and who wasn't scamming, and it's like, okay, so I gave that up too. So I totally gave it up probably by April, I'm guessing. So I didn't do anything more. And then, I told all my friends, I'm going to publish the book and everything, and then I dropped it. So then it was July, the end of July, my husband, or Papa, as he's known, got very, very, very sick. And he went into the CCU unit here in our local hospital for about 10 days, and they airlifted him to Seattle, where he was for about a month. And he had pancreatitis and from a gallstone that blocked all the ducts to his stomach. So then his kidneys started failing, and his liver failed, and his pancreas died, and he ended up with sepsis and a whole bunch more stuff, and he passed away the beginning of September.
Oh,
and so then I was really lost, and just didn't know what to do with myself, because we'd been together for 40 years. We'd been married for 36 and together for 40, and I didn't know what to do with my time. And I had no focus. So we were planning his memorial, and a girlfriend asked me, she said, so how's your book coming? So I proceeded to tell her everything I just told you. And she, about that same time, I heard this voice said, did you ask me? And I looked at Elizabeth, and I said, did you hear that? And she said, what? And I said, I just heard in my head, just as clear as we're talking, did you ask me? And she laughed, and she said, well, did you? And I said, no. So the next day, I prayed about it, and that next evening, I was signed up at self-publishing school online so I could learn how to publish it myself. And there, at that point, I all of a sudden had a focus, and I had something to do with myself from the time I woke up in the morning to the time I went to bed, and my book was published by the end of the year, just like I was told at the beginning of the year. So it was just it's a journey for me, and it's the grace of God to me for holding me upright. It has been an amazing journey in learning the whole publishing and author illustrator, because I did all the pictures too, world out there. And it's a fun book that it asks Something's Eating the Garden, and it goes through all kinds of ideas that something could be eating the garden, when at the very end of the book you find out it's none of those, and it's not at all what you were anticipating. So it's a fun book. I get a ton of positive feedback from adults who loved the book, and that it wasn't just a standard kids book, that it was engaging for adults as well as children.
Mm-hmm. Well, the pictures, the illustrations are beautiful.
Thank you.
Yes. Did you study to be an illustrator? Or is this just a hobby that?
No,
that
I
you...
didn't. I always liked to draw, and my dad was an architect. My mom, and he did his own graphite drawings that were beautiful. And my mom was very gifted artistically as well. In fact, when she was 16, she was asked by Hallmark to come work for them in another state, and her parents said, no, you're too young. So she never had the opportunity to go on to her art. Mm-hmm. But she was always showing me as I was a kid, if you want to make a tree look more like a tree and less like a stick, we're going to shade it. So I kind of grew up in art school, I guess. I remember my earliest recognition, earliest remembrance, I guess, is my dad when I was probably 3, I'm guessing, and coloring. And I was scribbling just like every other kid does, and he walked in, he goes, if you stay between the lines and you color in little circles, you'll be able to stay in the lines a little bit better. And so I tried that, but I didn't have the muscle coordination at the time, and so I went back to scribbling as soon as he left. But I remember that, and I remembered as years went by I could apply it. But so I kind of grew up in art school, I guess, in a sense, gave me the heart to do art, and so I was always drawing. I didn't do color because I was afraid of color. I didn't understand it. Since my dad did graphite, that's what I grew up with. And so after my oldest son got married, his mother-in-law and I became friends, and their family, and she said, Pam, you need to do color. And I said, I can't. She goes, you have to. So I wrote this book, and the very first picture that I attempted to do with color is the cover.
Really?
And yeah, so this book really is a whole. Not only is the storyline something special to me, it's also a walk in my artistic learning as well. So because they were done over a course of 7 years, wow. All the pictures. So I'm just learning, just learning to know who I am in art, and that's where I want to go is in art.
What an amazing story coming. I love how the story was born, and that fun time with you and your husband and your granddaughter, and so many wonderful things kind of come to life in that way. Just memories and family being together, doing things together. And I love how this story helped give you purpose at a time in your life when you were, such a difficult time in your life. So I think it's really a really special book in both of those ways, in that it came from a place of love, and that it really kind of spurred you on and is giving you a new life in a way, because you're rediscovering
Absolutely.
Your art and learning about publishing and illustrating, and I love it because there are so many people when they experience tragedy, they're not able to get up and to move on.
Well, you know what this book has done that I totally was unexpecting. I have now been given a purpose. I go to schools and I speak to kids that they have a purpose and they have a plan for their life that they might not know right now. I mean, I had no idea that, 50, 60 years ago that I would be doing this. Mm-hmm. This was like totally not on my radar. And but I feel like this is where I'm meant to be. I'm just absolutely loving it, going and talking to kids. I give them an art class while I'm there at the schools. And I'm able to hug the kids and say, you are special. And you can do this if you want to do this. You try it. Mm-hmm. Don't let somebody tell you can't. It's just, but I want each and every child to know there is a meaning and a purpose to their life. That's kind of been.
Yeah, that's so, and I love that message. It is so important for kids to learn how to dream. That sounds silly. I know that sounds silly. People go like, kids always dream. They always talk, but there's so many kids out there that don't have goals, that don't have dreams, that aren't picturing themselves in the future. And studies have shown that kids with dreams, kids with goals, they do better in school. They're happier. They're healthier. So I love that Something's Eating the Garden is not only a fun picture book for kids and families to experience together, but now knowing your backstory, this is a great, as families are reading this book, I think parents can share a little bit about your backstory and how you kind of overcame tragedy and help kids, really encourage kids to go for their dreams and to just to start dreaming.
Oh, I hope they do. I hope they do. And I would love to hear from people that felt like that they could go forward or they had encouragement to take that step. That would just be awesome.
Yeah.
To hear that something else has been birthed out of this. That would be just so cool to me.
Yeah.
Because I love kids. I love people and animals. And I'm a crazy chicken lady. But I really want to encourage people, because I don't think any of us know what potential we really have until we're encouraged to be brave and step forward.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I didn't.
And I'm happy that you were able to find that strength and come out on the other side and come out with this beautiful book that you're sharing with kids. And I love that one of the things that you one of the animals that you think may have been eating the garden was a crocodile. My wife and I just returned from a trip to Costa Rica, and we saw a crocodile. And in fact, they were like next to the canoe that we were in a river. And
wow.
That was a little creepy. It was like,
wow. I've seen, my husband and I were down in Florida. We were going to Disney World and Epcot Center, not Epcot Center, Cape Canaveral and all those places. And we were on a tour bus, and the driver pointed out, I think there was an alligator or something in the, just the ditch. Mm-hmm. And I swear I almost tipped over the bus by jumping up out of my seat and running to the other side to see it. I thought that was so fascinating. That would be so cool to be able to see them, but stay safe.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, we're thankful that we were safe, and we're thankful that Something's Eating the Garden is available to entertain and inspire families. Where can people go online to connect with Pam Fries and to find out more about your book?
Well, it is available on Amazon. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, you can get the ebook, the soft cover, or the hard cover on Amazon. You can also contact me through MightyLionPress.com, and that is through my website. Mm-hmm. And so they can go there, or they can send me an email at somethingseatingthegarden@gmail.com.
Awesome. And are there more books in your future?
Well, there's definitely a coloring book coming out with Something's Eating the Garden. So it's a coloring book and activity book. There's a couple other books that are in draft form. My grandkids all want me to now make a book about each one of them. So I think I might be obligated to at least get 4 more out.
Well, we look forward to hearing about those books and celebrating those books. And in the meantime, we want to encourage everybody to check out Something's Eating the Garden, the debut book from our guest, Pam Fries. Pam, thanks so much for sharing and for being on our show today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been just a wonderful experience and a fun memory for me.
Dawn Herbert will be here in just a moment, but before she joins us, if you haven't done so already, we would love to connect with you on social media. You can find us in a number of different places. On Facebook, it's facebook.com/readingwithyourkids. On Instagram, it's Reading With Your Kids. And on Twitter, just to keep you awake, it's @MagicJedley. We love to connect with you. We love responding to our fans, answering questions, and also we get an awful lot of great suggestions for guests. And we're also right now on our Facebook page asking folks what they think our new logo should be, or if we should keep our traditional logo. Check it all out. Please do connect with us on social media. Facebook.com/readingwithyourkids. At Twitter, it's @JedleyMagic. And of course, it's Reading With Your Kids on Instagram. Join us on the line right now from the great state of Missouri. She is the author of 2 super young adult titles. The first title is Warrior. The second is Princess. Please welcome to the show, Dawn Herbert. Dawn, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Really excited to have you on the show. Really excited to learn about these great books. And so why don't we begin with Warrior? Tell us all about it, please.
Okay. Warrior was written for my son. He's a teenager, and at a very young age, he started dealing with some depression. And so this book was basically written to help him through the whys. Why is this happening to me? You know, it's tempting as a young kiddo to get really frustrated with God, you know, in a religious home, to get really frustrated with God because we're taught that, you know, God is in charge, He's in control of everything. And there was a lot of things hurting my kiddo. And so I just began to look for scriptures that would minister to him in the why part of it. And from there, it just kind of led me into teaching my son about how God trains us to take on an active role as a warrior in our own lives, you know, to fight that battle, to fight the depression, to fight against the peer pressures and against sometimes even ourselves, and to let God lead you in that. And so that's Warrior. It was written to help young men, and surprisingly, I've had a lot of even older men tell me that it ministered to them. So I'm glad to hear that. I think anybody who's ever experienced any type of spiritual warfare can be ministered through this book. So
it's an interesting phrase that you use, and I like it a lot. Help your son navigate through the whys.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, being the dad of young men and young women who went through those teenage years. That is that why. Why is this happening to me? Why am I feeling this way? Why doesn't she like me? Why? And sometimes it's a real challenge to get them through, because it seems like every answer we give them, there's another why that pops up. So it's just not something that 3-year-olds do to us. I think it's something that teenagers do to themselves sometimes.
Yeah, and unfortunately, teenagers aren't as simple as 3-year-olds. So a 3-year-old might ask you why, and a teenager is going to throw something at you.
Right.
So a huge part of it is learning to take control in spite of your feelings, to pick up that baton and run with it even when you don't feel like running anymore, and just to trust God that He's got a purpose, and even if He's not the author of that particular pain, He is the author of life, and He can use that part to continue on in your story. And my son's had a really rough go of it, and I think the timing of this release of this book was pivotal for him. And I'm excited for other people to read it, because I do think there's a lot of healing in it.
Is there one scripture passage that was especially healing for your son?
Yes. It's very popular. There's a scripture in Ephesians 6, I believe it's 6 and 10. It says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers of darkness, and wickedness in high places. And when you can see those struggles as something that is in the spiritual realm happening, you don't blame other people anymore. You don't blame yourself. You don't wonder what's wrong with you. You just know you're at war. So I think that was pivotal for him to understand, there's something much bigger than you going on. And, it helps you forgive others, and it helps you to let go of that inner battle that you have going on with the blame and the shame and feelings of unworthiness. So
that's a big one for a lot of kids. Well, there's two things you touched on that, forgiveness is such, it's a difficult thing for kids to do. It's really difficult for, well, not just for kids, but for adults too. It's really difficult for kids and human beings to forgive others that hurt us. It's really difficult sometimes for us to forgive ourselves. And it's especially difficult to forgive ourselves sometimes when we don't feel worthy of it, when we don't feel that we're worthy to be loved.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things that happen in life that make us feel that way. It's not just a whisper in our ear because of just our human condition, but for instance, in my kids' lives, there's this issue of a very absent father, and my kids internalize that, and for whatever reason, they don't even understand they've been abandoned in their own hearts and minds. And so just helping my son see that there's this warfare going on in the different realm that he's not even part of, other than being the recipient of the horror. He's not causing it. And also helping him to see that in his own dad's life, there's this warfare going on. And so you can forgive all of these hard things that have happened to you, because ultimately there is an enemy, and it's not your father, it's not yourself.
Now, and you said that you wrote this book for your son. Now, is it just something that you just wrote and said, here, son, read this? Or was it a catalyst that was able to start conversations about all these things with your son?
I would say more of a catalyst. I definitely didn't throw it at him and say, here, go do your thing.
Yep.
He's not a reader naturally, and so it's kind of something that, funny enough, we have to read together. And I know your podcast is called Read with Your Kids. Mm-hmm. He's 15 years old, and I'm reading this with my son. And it does lead to good conversation.
Yeah, and that's something, whether your son or daughter is 10, 12, 15, whether they're great readers, not so great readers, striving readers, as we've started to say, reading with them, reading aloud with them at any age is really, it's a really fun thing to do. It's also a very, very powerful thing. It's something that brings you closer together. And like we said, it's a great way to start some really strong and difficult sometimes conversations.
Absolutely. And I think when my kids were little, I would put them to bed every night, sitting in between their little toddler beds, and I would read them a book while they're going to sleep. And I would say more than anything, that's probably been the most powerful relationship builder in my home, is sitting down with my kids and spending time with them in that way.
And I love the idea of reading stories, reading novels that have a faith foundation to them. And no matter what your faith, if you want to pass on faith and values to your kids, sure, books like the Bible and the Quran and the Torah, they're great. They're filled with phenomenal. My brain is freezing. They're phenomenal wisdom. But it's also great to kind of find novels that share that wisdom in story structure, and it's a great, just another way to kind of share those lessons with our kids and talk about them.
Absolutely. I know when I was a kid, I just had a love affair with Arthur S. Maxwell's Bible stories, and I read them all the time. And when I finally began to read the Bible more, I realized that Arthur Maxwell's versions are a lot more rich with detail, and the language is just so superior. I was a little disappointed, I think, because I don't know, it's a grown-up text, and I really do think there's something powerful in literature out there that is meaningful and has the scriptures that your children need, but also in a way that they can grasp it as a kiddo and be edified with the entertainment side of it too. So,
Yeah. You also wrote the book Princess. Tell us about that, please.
Yeah, so Princess is basically like the companion book to Warrior, in that Warrior was written for boys and Princess was written for girls. I have a 15-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter. And like I said, I foresaw some turbulence in their teenage years. I'm a single parent, and so I just didn't want them to grow up without guidance into the spiritual part of everything that's, everything they've been raised in. So Princess is a little different. It's not completely different. There's a lot of scriptures that they both share. But it's written for a girl's heart. And actually I had someone the other day tell me he read both books and he got more out of Warrior. And I said, well, it was written that way. You're not a woman, so you're not going to appreciate the feminine aspect of Princess. But the Princess book, it basically parallels the princess storyline. So the plot line of a princess's life. She is born into this family. In most princesses' lives, their father dies. And there's this wicked stepmom or this wicked witch or this fiery dragon or whatever. There's distress, that leads them to captivity, that ultimately warrants a rescue and a happily ever after, right? So the Princess book is every element of that, as you, the reader, being the daughter of a king. So the Bible tells us we are children of God, the King of Kings. So the Bible discusses first your spiritual lineage and your eventual heritage as a daughter of God. And then it goes on to talk about the distress in your life. So there's distress that happens to every princess. We have it wrong in that we think that princesses are these blessed and highly favored and nothing ever goes wrong in their life. But every princess story, there's distress. And so, it talks about the distress and it confronts that through scripture. Like, why is this happening to me again? It's because you are a princess. And then it goes on to talk about every princess eventually becomes captive, to something. And there's, a fiery dragon or a wicked stepmother, but there's this enemy that's keeping you bound. So it talks about how our distresses lead us to believe lies about ourselves, and how, we eventually become bound by those lies and we believe things about ourselves that may or may not be true, but we don't have to stay in that place. So of course, if you're captive, you need a rescue. And that's when it talks about Jesus as your Prince of Peace coming to save you from, the wickedness that's surrounding you and the lies that you're bound by and the pain that you're bound by or whatever. And then of course, after you become a Christian, it doesn't sell the idea that once you become a Christian, life's going to be dandy, but that there is an eternal happily ever after attached to the rescue of Christ. So you will have that happily ever after.
I imagine this is a very popular book amongst kids in religious schools and in churches. Any kind of beyond what you shared about some adult men who read Warrior and got a lot out of it. Any other feedback from folks who've been experiencing the book?
Yes. Unfortunately, there was one person that wanted to talk to me yesterday, and I didn't make it to her. But she said she had told someone that there was she had a personal story that it just delivered her from all of this angst and unforgiveness and inner turmoil. And I wish I knew more about it to tell you, but I didn't get to meet with her yesterday. It's for my daughter. This is how I've raised her, and I guess not surprisingly, I believe in the power of Scripture. My daughter has grown up knowing these things and believing these things, and has managed to become one of the most exceptional young women I've ever met, in spite of the fact that she is also, has also lived the same life as Austin. She's been abandoned and rejected, and she's just given her heart to God and allowed him to be the father that I told her, he was. So I know that it's a very powerful truth, because I've seen it heal my daughter at a very young age and just continue to minister to her.
Well, I'm so happy, because it's devastating for kids who, divorce happens, and that's devastating. But then, when one parent, just as to use your words, abandons the kids, that's devastating. And it's wonderful when we understand that despite that, we are still loved. And I'm so happy that your daughter was able to experience that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So where can folks connect with you online to find out more about Dawn Herbert, and also find out more about Warrior and Princess?
Okay. Well, I have a Facebook page, and I also have Twitter and LinkedIn, but I don't know how easily findable I am on either one of those. But if you go to my Facebook page, I'm pretty sure I put links out there to both of those recently. I have a blog, and so people can reach out to me through that. It's awakeneddawn.wordpress.com. I am also willing to take emails at dawnbherbert@gmail.com. The books are available on Amazon.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is really exciting. Are there more books in your future?
Oh, yes. I want to say I started the next one like the moment the publication was through. I have a lot of ideas.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, we're really excited. We think that especially if you are a Christian family, you want to share the faith with your kids, your teenage kids, you will want to check out Warrior and Princess by our guest, Dawn Herbert. Dawn, thank you so much for being part of our show.
Thank you for having me.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Anthony Mena. Don't miss it. It is a fun conversation. We want to thank the folks who made today's show so very, very wonderful. We want to thank Pam Fries. Check out Something's Eating the Garden. We also want to thank Dawn Herbert. Check out her books, Warrior and Princess. We also want to thank my amazing producer, Fatima Khan. Check out her blog at readingwithyourkids.com. Of course, I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. And most of all, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.